welcome to Xcede's Sofa Series from a design perspective. I am super excited to be joined here by Tom Smith, Senior Design Director at Condé Nast. Welcome to our Sofa Series. So it goes without saying that you've had the most incredible design career. Can you let our viewers and listeners give us a bit of an insight about you and your career?
Yeah, of course. Well, I mean, you've inflated my career a touch there, but yeah, it's been interesting. I think over 2 decades in the industry. So I started pre-digital. And cut my teeth mainly on branding, print, kind of a world that's ever so slightly getting forgotten now, perhaps. So I started, I was recruited out of university during my final exhibition, which was all very exciting. And then kind of joined the industry and saw kind of what it actually looks like, warts and all. Very unglamorous, not quite what I was expecting. I was actually based at a company fairly local to me that was, the premises was above a print house. So we were kind of up in their storage area. So it was pretty untidy, pretty messy, not quite the kind of scene that I thought I was going to be joining. But nonetheless, that gave me the opportunity to enter into this industry and really start to, get into some really interesting challenges. So I stayed there for a year, very quickly moved on, felt that actually I needed to kind of, keep moving, keep progressing. And then joined an agency that was based in Leicester, so outside London, where I predominantly have spent my career. And that for me, in retrospect, was always where I feel I kind of learned the actual ropes of what it takes to be a design creative. And really solve user problems. So again, still lots of print-based work, lots of branding-orientated work. But I was fortunate enough to be servicing clients in and around London. So we worked for people like Chelsea Football Club.
Oh wow.
Welcome Collection, which is up the road. Who else? The V&A. Somerset House. So we kind of serviced either sports-based clients or kind of leisure and culture-based clients. So that was really interesting. That really gave me my first exposure to, kind of creating for an audience, know. So when you start your career, you're still in that kind of mode of creating for yourself a little bit. And you have to learn very quickly to kind of, shake that off. You're not designing for yourself. You can't be precious. You are designing with end users in mind. Then I moved on to, I scribbled it down so I didn't forget, an educational specialist down here in London, based in Waterloo. And again, that was a really interesting exposure into a very different sector. So working in the education sector, having different objectives and parameters to try and work towards. And again, that was a great opportunity to face into clients such as BP, Eon, Npower, and a few others. But it was in the context of helping them deliver educational programs.
Oh, amazing.
So the type of content and the type of challenges was very different than maybe their kind of B2C offering, for instance. So I stayed there for a while, then moved to an independent agency based in Farringdon by the name of Aqueduct. So that was a great opportunity. Loved my time there, faced into lots of sports clients, and then also public and private sector. So it was a real kind of
mixture. You've had a mixture.
Yeah. So on the public and private sector, we handled Network Rail as an account. So a little bit of a dry subject matter, the network, infrastructure for public transport. But what that did mean is that creatively we had to go above and beyond, and arguably there were some of the bigger creative solutions to challenges that we had for other clients, because we needed to be much more expressive and arguably elaborative, memorable, etc. And then conversely, as I say, with the sports-based clients, we were working for the FA, the RFU, Man City at the time, just
wow.
as they came into all of their money, and
Yeah.
again we fully built out all of their digital landscape. So that was really exciting. I then moved from there to an independent branding agency, so specialised in branding, and that was predominantly for kind of landowners is probably the best way to describe it. So people like Grosvenor, for instance, so people in and around London that own big areas of land and have, you know, prestigious buildings and developments going on. So it was all about how can you kind of connect an audience with, you know, that opportunity, with that kind of dream, so to speak.
Yeah.
I then worked for an independent agency. They were actually based in Singapore.
Oh, wow, okay.
So I was supporting them on bringing their service and their offering to the UK.
Yeah.
And there was a partnership with Toshiba. So lots of kind of B2B to C. So again, in terms of that challenge, that was kind of interesting as well, which is, you know, how do you engage other buyers who need to buy a service for their consumers?
Yeah.
I then ended up at Aviva. So again, I kind of have pivoted quite heavily throughout my career.
Industries, different industries.
Which has kept, I think, you know, looking back and thinking through my career to date, you know, it's kept that challenge as fresh as it can be. So you don't kind of end up leading by assumptions or, you know, kind of lead with tried and tested solutions. You know, every opportunity I've been able to kind of test my design thinking and execution against, you know, a different audience.
Yeah.
So Aviva, obviously well known for insurance, but also for health-based products, investments and retirement as well. And that was my first opportunity to really get hands-on with a design system, and that's something that has kind of carried on into my current role at Condé Nast. So currently I'm at Condé. I've been there for 18 months.
Nice.
And I head up the team that looks after our digital publishing capabilities. So I need a much better term for it, but it's basically our engine room. It's everything that allows our brands to execute on, you know, their objectives in a digital context for our users. So it's all of our CMS, it's all of our design system, and lots of other internal publishing tools. So that's me. That's where I've been.
Just to summarise the past couple of years, which is incredible.
Exactly.
So thank you so much for going through that. Obviously, you've had an incredible career in design. Obviously, the topic of today is actually talking about leading with design authenticity. What is that?
Well, I wanted to discuss, you know, design authenticity today from a leadership perspective. As you know, you can find anything online, you know, and there'll be oodles of articles written about this subject, but it is something that doesn't seem to be part of the ongoing conversation. You know, things kind of, you know, trends come and go, and the zeitgeist changes. And for me, it's something that throughout my career, certainly as I became a leader, it's something that I wanted, you know, at the heartbeat of what I do and how I operate. So I am unashamedly personable when it comes to leading others. I like to get to know them and understand what makes them tick. But likewise, when it comes to stakeholders and, you know, managing upwards as well, I like to do that with a degree of, you know, personality and understand, you know, who I'm actually working with. And that makes the job far more enjoyable, you know. So for me, leading with authenticity is around having a set of principles. And this isn't ever something that I've kind of sat down, written down, you know, and keep with me in a notebook. But it's something that you kind of internalize and keep with you, you know. So things such as, you know, transparency, you know, I'm about keeping detail as visible as possible. You know, so everybody around you, and certainly those that you lead, understand, you know, what we're doing at any given stage and the reasons for doing that. I think there's also one aspect that I try to exude, I suppose, is a degree of vulnerability with my teams or with others as well, to show that, you know, nobody has all of the answers, and that goes right the way up to the CEO. You know, nobody has all of the answers ready-made, and on occasions you won't know, the answer to something, or you won't know which direction to move in. And with that, you have to, invite people into your world a little bit. It can be a little bit lonely as a leader, and as I say, there is this kind of sometimes an expectation or an air that you should know everything. But I think by leading with authenticity, you can involve people in that decision making, make them feel part of it, make them feel invested, and move together as one, so to speak, as opposed to, making a decision, maybe it's a wrong call, then you can't take it back because you can't be seen to be, indecisive or things like that. It's kind of, there's that kind of overhang of what I would call a slightly old school mentality where you have to be almost kind of bulletproof, and it's kind of like, well, actually you can lead in a very different way by today's standards.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that will translate through your design, because you are leading with design authenticity. So I guess that kind of brings on to my next question. What's the importance of that, especially from a design's perspective?
Yeah, I think when we're talking about authenticity in the context of design, I think it's something that's very well covered nowadays, but it is something that really bears true, which is, we have to be doing right by our users, and you can only do that by being authentic.
Yeah.
And, you hear a lot about, user-centered design approaches and, kind of that methodology, which is 100% how we should be approaching, any challenges that we have, be it commercial or maybe even internal. You can only get to the best results by actually understanding what you're trying to solve. So it goes back to my point around, not leading or designing or delivering with assumptions in mind. And certainly, as I mentioned, across my career, I've joined various companies that have, a huge degree of legacy. So Aviva, for instance, over 350 years established. Condé Nast, over 120 years. So there can be occasions where certain processes, it's almost that kind of, well, this is how we've always done it. And if you're not careful, you can then kind of rest on your laurels and not really dig into, what is the user actually after. And I've always had this kind of analogy in my head that I try and keep present at all times, which is that there's no point developing a Bugatti Veyron if the user actually only needs a Ford Focus. So it's kind of, you've got to understand what your user needs, so you don't over deliver or you over engineer. And as I say, coming back to the point around authenticity, it's about really understanding and learning, and keeping that detail as visible as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And how do you do that currently at the moment? How do you do that? And how do you, I guess, any successes, any, I guess, not failures, but any mistakes that you've had?
Yeah, I think naturally there's a lot of the kind of the traditional methods, so, lead with research, before you're doing anything, lead with that user research, really understand your subject matter. Even if you have insight from 6 months ago, you almost have to discount that, and I'm not a fan of recycling insight too heavily. I think you've got to be of the moment, you've got to be, behaviors and user conditions change so rapidly. We owe it to ourselves to really understand that user in the moment, and certainly when technology's involved as well. Again, obviously everything progresses, at a rate of knots. Last week's method of choice, has very quickly been moved on, and users they will ditch you as quickly as they found you. But yeah, essentially, if it's outdated, they will move on very quickly. And your user can be as fickle as you will find, and it's giving them enough reasons, authentic reasons, to keep coming back. And you can only do that by learning what they actually need. So having lots of user-based sessions, so one-to-one sessions, kind of really understanding what are the problems, per individual. And then hopefully they kind of multiply enough to be lasting solutions for the masses. So that's kind of, as I say, it's all about, sounds too simple, to be honest, and it's nothing necessarily new. But a lot of businesses will try and slim down on certain processes.
Of course.
You know, because it's kind of like, well, we know our user, you know, we know what they want, and
it's having that assumption, I guess, that they think we
Yeah.
already know our users. So how often do you mentioned that research is super, super important to understand your users, and of course everything changes as well. How often do you do that from currently, I guess, at Condé Nast?
I mean, at Condé, as much as possible. Obviously, you know, we only have a finite amount of resource.
Sure.
So we do kind of obviously prioritize, you know, where are the bigger efforts that we can place, you know, the bigger initiatives that we're trying to deliver. It's also a case of identifying kind of, I always call them kind of stepping stones. So with some bigger initiatives, you can actually unlock several aspects of insight that actually inform, you know, multiple areas of the business. But yeah, it's kind of as frequently as possible. We're currently in discussions around partnering with various other entities. So, you know, if it's data led, we have those capabilities internally, but we also have partners externally. And then likewise for more traditional kind of user-based research, again, it's a combination of our internal team, but also there's an opportunity to ramp up with external candidates or entities as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess from your perspective, what are the main challenges that you feel is targeted around the idea of design authenticity, both from your personal perspective, but also from like as an overall view of the market, I guess? What's the kind of biggest challenges that you think people face and businesses face?
I think for most businesses, one of the biggest challenges is that to be authentic, it takes a degree of time. And it's not something that you can necessarily, you know, just engineer on the spot. And as I say, you know, carving out that time to, you know, speak, listen and hear from your user, often, as I say, that can be something that can be challenged, you know, on occasions when you're working through planning. Thankfully at Condé, you know, we have a level of design maturity and understanding from a department and a company perspective that really puts, you know, good focus and attributes a lot of effort into, you know, expending that time and energy. So gone are the days where you have to kind of really champion, okay, what is this discipline? Why do we do it? What are the results that it achieves? So I think for us specifically, we don't have those challenges anymore. So it's mainly just, you know, building in that time, you know, making others around us aware of what that discipline looks like and what that practice is, and the reasons that we go to those lengths. So there is a degree of, you know, kind of internal learning, very much as it would be for others learning about other disciplines within the department as well.
Yeah, amazing. And you kind of touched upon it earlier on with regards to your team. So how do you instill that into your team? Obviously, you're a fantastic leader and being able to, this is something that is super, super important to any business. How do you instill that into your team?
Yeah, I think it's something that I personally constantly work on it. And I think over the years that I've been a leader, you know, I've definitely changed and learned, you know, what works with certain individuals, you know, what works in certain scenarios, be it in person or leading, you know, from afar with a global team. I think the thing for me is, and I'll go back to that point around transparency. You know, I keep everything as transparent as I can. Obviously, there are certain aspects that are either sensitive or you know, kind of private, and you know, obviously you treat those accordingly. But anything that needs to be, you know, kind of cascaded and relayed, I'll make sure that everybody has that information up front, even if I don't quite understand it myself, or even if there's a bit of a TBC involved. It's kind of like, okay, there's a discussion here. Here's what it looks like. It's a little bit abstract. You know, any questions, but let me come back to you with a little bit more. And I think, you know, certainly from a global perspective, it's about joining people together. You know, it's giving us all a collective vision, you know, and that's kind of hopefully where I come in terms of that strategic, you know, direction and, you know, kind of outlining, okay, where do we want to place our time and energy? But then after that, I allow everybody as much freedom to interpret that as they see fit, and to mirror it against their strengths as best they can. So I really try and give everybody that time and space. I'm not one for micromanaging, even in a kind of remote capacity. I'll check in with people, but I'd much rather they relay information back to me rather than me kind of chasing them.
Yeah.
And it's a two-way, dialogue. If they need something from me, then by all means, give me a nudge.
Yeah.
And I've always said that to everybody is, if you need something, just give me a nudge.
Yeah.
And I may not respond in that moment, but it's definitely something that, for me, that's what I'm. That is almost the primary objective of my role, is to be, there for others.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to, kind of, I guess, the sensitive areas of leading others, and, on occasions there's, kind of things happening in personal and kind of private lives. And again, it's giving everybody that forum. That's what I like to do, is give everybody that forum to be as authentic as they need to be in that moment, and as honest and as trusting as they can be. And hopefully, that's always paid dividends in terms of just that comfortability that everybody has. It's kind of, hopefully they have that feeling of being able to do the very best that they can each day. And knowing that I'm in their corner if they need me.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my general approach.
Amazing. And obviously you come from Condé Nast, which is a global business. How do you stay connected with obviously other people across the world? How do you manage to kind of instill that design authenticity even halfway across the pond, I guess?
Well, I mean, it is tricky. There's only so many hours in the day, and obviously there's only so many kind of golden hours in the day where we obviously overlap. Again, there's simple things like all of the, kind of regular touch points. So, Slack and obviously email and things like that. What I try to do is keep consistent time for individuals. So we have, kind of weekly one-to-one catch-ups and things like that, where we may even not have a great deal to discuss. But that's almost on occasions quite nice, where you can, kind of freewheel a little bit more, understand a bit about them, what makes them tick, what are the parameters around them that allow them each day to do the very best. And I'm definitely one for investing time and energy to get to know individuals. And if they have challenges, or if circumstances change, or some of the backdrop changes, then at least I can be informed to deflect others away from that individual for any given stage. Or it may be, if there's an issue that arises, contextually I can understand, actually that's maybe why. So giving everybody that opportunity to have time with myself, and then acting on things. I'm a pragmatist at heart. I like to solve problems in the moment, be it for others or for the business. And I'm very practical when it comes to kind of systemically working through those to-do items. I don't like to leave people second guessing or kind of waiting. So as much as possible, I try to keep that visibility and deal with things in the moment. And what I tend to find, hopefully from a global perspective, is that everybody feels invested, everybody feels part of a unit, part of a team. And as I say, knows that I'm in their corner for whenever they need it.
Almost feel like they're being heard no matter where they are in the world and everything.
And again, something that I try to really voice is, it doesn't matter if you feel it's big or small, come and have some time, come and speak to me. Nothing's kind of like, oh, I can't bring that to you because it's such a small thing, you've got better things to do with your time. Absolutely not. I'd much rather somebody just reach out, and we can discuss things, as I say, big or small, quite frankly.
And I guess almost like no matter what level they are, whether that
100%.
is and stuff and everything.
100%.
And that kind of like nicely ties me on to, how do you lead upwards? It's obviously, it's all well and good leading downwards, of being able to lead your team and everything. How do you kind of manage those, getting a table at C-suite, for example? How do you manage to, especially with like a big established brand such as Condé Nast, and also like equally with Aviva, for example, how do you manage to educate upwards, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think it differs company by company how mature their design outlook is. Thankfully at Condé, as I say, we have a particularly mature design outlook, and naturally for the brands that we cater for, we have to be. That's almost a given. I think when it comes to managing up, it is a fine art. I think first and foremost you have to be conversing around the same things in a similar manner. So others don't want necessarily to get in amongst the granular detail of design philosophy, for instance, but what they will care about is the business outcome and the value that we're driving for our users. So it's finding that common parlance and really using the same language, quite frankly. It's then very much a case of exemplifying, the power of design, and that's where you can retain your authenticity, because then you're not making, bad decisions or trade-offs, or, as I say, leading with assumptions, or, kind of making any kind of missteps. And that's where, you have to double down on being able to exemplify the impact of what you do. And that's where it gets quite exciting. I like to geek out a little bit in terms of, really understanding the impact through our work. And that could be, through either KPIs or, OKRs, or obviously focusing in on return on investment. Everybody has a different, tried and tested kind of method that they follow. At Condé, we use an OKR methodology, and that works really well to gauge that design input, but actually do it with outcomes that you can relay to others, so you can actually see where that impact is, and just reduce that uncertainty. That's kind of what I really enjoy, and that's something that I try and echo upwards, which is we can reduce that business uncertainty through understanding our user and then creating solutions accordingly.
Amazing. And I guess from their side, they'll be able to understand, that's how you'll get your design ideas across, whilst bearing in mind their kind of business kind of outcomes that they're looking to be able to achieve and everything. Which
absolutely. And then you get into really fantastic conversations around you push each other then, because you've built that trust, you've built that rapport, and you can actually say, well, actually, if we did X, it could just tip us over the line for, objective 1, 2, or 3, because of these reasons. And, you learn to feed off each other in that respect.
Absolutely. When you've got such a mature design system or whatever, a design, things that are coming in with more design maturity, how do you input, sorry, I'm putting a curveball into this and stuff, how do you influence of bringing brand new ideas, especially when there is such a design maturity already, which may be a little bit more, not reluctant, but like less willing to change, I guess?
Yeah, I think as ever, it's proving out the value of undertaking that work and taking it down a certain direction. So that could be through new insight that you've learned from users. That could be through data-led insight. We really start to understand particular patterns that are happening. It may be that we're actually taking a little bit of a punt, and that's where we actually have an experimental team that look into slightly more speculative ideas and executions, and that's where again you then start to identify the parameters for those experiments. So obviously less big bang, slightly more controlled, lower percentages, and obviously make your learnings from there. So it is about, really putting that scaffolding around, okay, if we're going to do something that's going to be, slightly unknown and a little bit more progressive, how do we do that, but in a manner that, kind of keeps that ripple so that we can understand what the outcome was, as opposed to just doing, kind of big bang and then being harder to kind of monitor the success.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think is the future for design? Obviously, there's so much things out there at the moment, so a little bit of a curveball question for you, but what do you think is the future for design?
Yeah, good question. I think, if I knew the answer directly, I'd probably be very rich. But I think the one thing that's very much part of conversations at the moment is obviously artificial intelligence. You can't get away from AI being part of that conversation. The thing for me, rather than the technology and the capability that provides, I've always felt that there's a kind of a flip side to that for companies, which is about retaining that authenticity and really users aren't stupid, and nobody likes to feel like they've been monopolized either, which arguably could happen through AI, through obviously this kind of synthetic learning. So for me, the actual future arguably could be there's a time and a place for AI, it feels, but I think the next progressive step from there is how do you retain, that brand authenticity and that authenticity as a company, so that any service or any experience that you create doesn't feel hollow, doesn't feel manufactured, and doesn't feel like it's a combination of a bunch of algorithms. And I think that for me is slightly more interesting. So I'm kind of projecting ahead a little bit more, which is when we've exhausted this new wave of, okay, AI is fantastic, it's really interesting, it can do a lot for you, but what happens at the other side of that when it comes to that consumer, once they've exhausted like that kind of that kind of sense of a gimmick almost, what then happens, and how do you retain that credibility within the marketplace? So I think that for me is kind of one of the future challenges, less so of a trend but more of a challenge.
So Tom, for you, obviously, design leader at Condé Nast, what are the kind of type of qualities that you look for people when you come into your team or work alongside with?
I think the values that I particularly warm to and look for, I think there has to be openness. I think leading across a global team, you can't get anywhere if detail's hidden or people are holding back. So I think openness. I think a willingness to learn is definitely key. As I say, nobody has all of the answers, myself included. So we have to continually learn and understand. I think humility goes a long way. I've always had this kind of mantra throughout my career that on occasions you have to put your hands up and just say, I've either messed up or, I don't understand or, I've made a mistake. And that's infinitely easier to move on from rather than kind of hiding that detail and, kind of manifesting a problem. I think humour goes a long way, certainly, again, leading in a global capacity, you have to have that point of connection and, humour is always a really nice way to tease that out. What else? Passion. I think passion, again, goes hand in hand with learning. That passion really fuels going that extra mile, really fuels expending, time and energy, digging into your craft, really understanding what makes the design world tick, commercially and, for users as well.
A design kind of like you're at a lead level, C-suite, you've got the pressures from above and also from your team equally below, but also from your users like myself. How do you manage stress? because I'm terrible at it. So it would be great to understand how you deal with it.
Yeah, I think everybody handles stress in a very different way. And what people recognise as stress is, obviously has a spectrum as well. I think personally I try, as I say, I'm a pragmatist at heart, so I break things down, what can be done in the moment, what can be done this week, and then what can be done in the future. And that helps just kind of compartmentalise what you're facing into and manage, that degree of stress or perception of stress. As I say, I think, transparency keeps things out in the open. So, there shouldn't be secrets or hidden detail or missed detail that kind of fuels that general kind of anxiety or aspect of stress. But yeah, otherwise, I think it's about being joined up. It's about having conversations. It's about having the detail. There's nothing worse than feeling, slightly a step behind everybody else. So, arming yourself with that detail eliminates, that heightened sense of stress through basically not understanding. And again, as I mentioned, it's having that ability to put your hand up and say, I don't know what we're talking about or what you meant by X. And, therefore that doesn't fuel that sense of stress as well. Otherwise, I've always had a capacity to take on, a wide load and kind of revel in it to a degree. I think you kind of have to an extent. And then it's kind of learning those methods, day-to-day time management, priority allocation, all of those sorts of things. So everybody has these, the amount of articles that have been written around, here's my 5 a.m., day, and, I start off by doing XXX. I've not fallen into those traps per se. But you kind of take, little snippets from information. You go, actually, I quite like that. I'm going to just weave that into my day. It makes, this aspect that I was finding stressful easier, for instance. And then interestingly, a little story, a few of my close friends used to nickname me the Atlas after the sculpture. So the sculpture, the man who's holding the world on his shoulders. And that was obviously just a metaphor for the fact that, I do have a large capacity to take things on, but do it in a calm, rational manner rather than running around with my hair on fire.
Which is what I would probably do, and I can just I can't unsee that now on Sam and everything. Indeed. Which is all good. So what do you do outside of work as well? Obviously you've got a fantastic kind of career ahead of you, and what you're working with and what you have had. What do you do outside work?
Outside of work, so wife and children keep me busy, keep me sane, keep me grounded, I guess, and also, they fuel my ambition. I do a lot of things with them in mind. But in terms of, and kind of linking to the stress question, exercise, that's what I swear by as my outlet. My wife thinks I'm borderline obsessed, but I enjoy it. That's for me on any given day. It's that little bit of quality time just for myself. It allows you to process the day, even if you're not thinking about the day, just do it subliminally. But also, what I also find is it allows me to achieve something or complete something in a day. There's occasions where things overrun, week by week, you might not get everything done, or you're waiting for a conversation, or maybe somebody's away, for instance. So you're not always getting that kind of that sense of progress or gratification of completion. So for me, conversely, exercise is my way of kind of having that into my day. That thankfully, is a positive aspect and something that just allows me to unwind, really.
Brilliant. What's on your design bucket list? I've been so excited to ask this question. So, and I'm sure our viewers would be really, really intrigued to see what's on your design bucket list.
It's interesting, isn't it? I think nobody necessarily asks themselves this question, or maybe they do. Maybe they wake up each morning and, kind of have this affirmation. And I think there's there's some kind of touch points that I'd love to face into in terms of sectors and those sorts of things. I think in terms of bucket list, and maybe this is more kind of legacy led, is around, you know, really creating and leaving meaningful experiences. You know, I think when you start your career, you just want to create because you can, and that's your passion. And as I say, you kind of do it selfishly. You do it for yourself first and foremost. And then you learn that actually you have to, you know, detach yourself from the work. You know, you got to love it, but you got to be willing to throw it in the bin as well. But understanding that you can create something meaningful and something that actually, you know, really helps an individual on a day-to-day basis, and, you know, for want of going too earnest, but, you know, giving them that independence to achieve something or you know, complete something or do a particular task. So in terms of that kind of that bucket list / sort of legacy, there's something that's on my site actually, and I've scribbled it down here because I didn't want to try and paraphrase. But what I try and aim for, and what I'd love to theoretically be leaving behind, is this essence of, you know, turning customers into fanatics, you know. And I think that's where my kind of branding sensibilities really kind of come to the fore around how do you create these connections? Why should somebody engage with your brand or your experience? And in turn, how do you make them a fanatic? You know, how do you keep them coming back, essentially? And then it's kind of turning products into obsessions, you know. So we all have, you know, products or services that we go back to habitually because they work, you know, and we become semi-obsessed with them. So obviously we've seen that through social. You know, some people don't even necessarily consciously recognize why they're using these things anymore. It's because it's become that kind of obsession or that habit. And then internally facing, it's about turning employers into, or employees, sorry, into ambassadors. You know, so again, when we're talking about leading with authenticity, it is about rallying behind the same information. You know, it's rallying behind the same business, the same objectives, you know, the same key results. You know, and really, we should all be advocating at the same time, you know, for the business, you know, for the same purpose, with the same values, you know, at the heartbeat. And then lastly, and this one sounds tremendously hyperbolic, but I'll say it nonetheless. So it's about turning brands into religions.
I love that.
And, you know, removing sensitivity around religion, but using that as the analogy. At Condé, you know, with you know, such high-profile brands such as Vogue, Vanity Fair, The New Yorker, Allure, etc., you know, they do have followings where it is almost their religion, you know. And
I'm one of them with Vogue. I'm one of them.
Yeah, you know, it is about creating these worlds that people can step into and exist and thrive and really, you know, kind of get as much out of as they want, really. So not religions in the traditional sense, but religions in terms of, you know, these kind of environments that they can live and exist within.
Amazing. Well, I think that concludes us today.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for your time, Tom. It's been super interesting to get an insight into you and what design authenticity means to you. And yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Awesome. Thank you.